A dark room with a silent hallway. Something mysterious is lurking around the corner. You know it's there, you can barely hear it, and you know that other than you and whatever it is, there's no one else in here. Most horror media places the protagonist in a horrifying situation alone, and we assume we know why. We assume isolation is the fear, whether it be in a desolate spaceship with an intelligent alien hell-bent on hunting you down, or in a creepy restaurant where the animatronics may or may not move, or in a very real threat of two people barging in and possibly wanting you dead when you're home alone. Now, the media portrayal of one of those things sure doesn't sound like the others. On one hand, we have a dangerous unknown entity hunting us down, creating a horrifying game of cat and mouse, whilst the other is a strategy base building power fantasy. But how so? Kevin is the definition of isolated. His family is nowhere around. He's nothing but an 8-year-old child trapped in a massive creaky house in the suburbs. If this were a different movie, he would be trashed in 10 minutes. But we see that Kevin isn't one bit scared. Far from it, he's having the time of his life. He's going around setting up traps and playing a game of catch with the very people who could, for all we know, be out to get him. This confidence in our protagonist doesn't come from a forced subversion of trope expectations for a comedic gag, and while it does serve that purpose, it comes from a deeper writing standpoint. The two things that a protagonist of a piece of adventure fiction is given, but the protagonist of a horror media is completely stripped bare of: total awareness and total agency. Kevin knows both the terrain and the incoming threat. The wet bandits aren't super intelligent supernatural ghosts. If anything, we as the audience knows they are just two comically incompetent burglars. Our protagonist is aware about what is coming for him and when. And in terms of agency, the movie completely flips isolation on its head and makes it the very weapon that Kevin holds. Complete isolation in his home gave him the authority to fortify his little suburban base in a way that would never have been possible if any responsible supervising adult would have been present. There is zero unknown variable present here. Our brains can simply just not correlate this being an equation to horror as we watch it through. So then, what exactly does our other two examples of isolation have that makes them actually horrifying? You're bolted to your seat. If the house in Home Alone was a fortress, the room in Five Nights at Freddy's is a coffin. The cameras lie to you. It's not a question of if they're coming, just when. There is the obvious visual deviation from something light-hearted into the more grunge, dark, and claustrophobic room of FNAF. The utility of art itself in horror is a topic of discussion for another day, but for now, the limited movement is a demonstration of the lack of agency. You can traverse camera feeds and try to piece together what's going on around you, but there's only so much you can do with the information you gather. You know there is something dangerous lurking out there, and you know it's coming for you. But you don't have the final piece of the puzzle, of when it's going to take that leap at you. This restricts agency coupled with your already corrupt awareness. The player is presented with ways to obtain information, but the very limited method of obtaining them inherently generates a sense of fear. Scrubbing through the camera feeds knowing that something is lurking out there turns it into an uncomfortable act of vulnerability, which manages to spook you by tapping into your primal need of security and placing it at jeopardy. In this way, what is supposed to be a tool against the horrors itself becomes an element of the horror in the game. Alien Isolation uses this masterfully to terrify the player, wherein the tracker provided to the player is half as reliable as its name makes it out to be. While you may hear the beeping, you do not quite know where exactly the creature is around you, again placing one aspect of the terror right in the player's hands. This is also a system most horror media utilizes, one of an unreliable narrator, where the world itself is out to lie to the audience, and the player is as ignorant about the horrors as the protagonist. The sudden noises, the shadow in the corner of your eye, a soft whistling noise. Is that just a pipe, or is it a creature, or maybe even a survivor? The less the players know, the more uncanny everything appears, which places the player in a situation where partial awareness turns out to be even more terrifying than a complete lack of it. If FNAF is the fear of being unable to move, Alien Isolation is the terror of being afraid to breathe around the creature. You have legs, you have a weapon, and you even have a tracker, but none of it makes you feel safe. On the other hand, it adds to the horror of your agency slowly draining and your awareness falling short where it matters the most. Now when we place the three series we discussed side by side, we realize why one is clearly less scary than the others, and exactly how it achieves that gap in emotion without throwing the audience into cognitive dissonance. By following the three key factors to horror: lack of community, lack of awareness, and lack of agency. And when you put these together, you effectively make the player feel helplessness, the ultimate form of horror. There are even many among us who crave solitude because it gives us control. However, we fear isolation because it strips that control away. The empty room isn't the monster is the fact that in that room, you are unaware and incapable of a means of safety. In that room, you are helpless. And when we have an equation at hand, we are then bound by the laws of science to check for exceptions. We have so far talked about being isolated in a room, the horror of being alone in a hallway, a surveillance room, a coffin. But what happens when you remove the walls entirely? If FNAF is the horror of restriction, Subnautica is the horror of the infinite and the vast. On paper, this game should be a paradise. You have total freedom and a high dosage of agency. You can swim in any direction, build bases, and craft weapons to defend yourself. According to our earlier hypothesized formula, this should be another power fantasy like Home Alone. So why does staring into the deep ocean trigger a primal panic attack in almost everyone who plays it? The vast and alien ocean introduces yet another variable to our equation: exposure. In alien isolation, the walls trap and limit you, but they also protect you. You know the alien can come through the solid steel floor, and so you only have to really watch the doors and winds. You may be cautious of the creature lurking about just around the corner, but what happens then when there are no corners to hide you from it? When the threat could reach you from above, below, and from every side? This breaks our understanding of awareness. In the ocean, sound travels 4 times faster than in air. You can hear a reaper leviathan roaring from kilometers away. Your audio awareness is effectively cranked way past what is necessary, but your visual awareness is terrible. We only have eyes facing forward after all. And even then, the water is murky and light fades after a few hundred meters. This creates a terrifying sensory dissonance. You know it sees you, but you cannot see it. This is also what creates that sense of fear and adrenaline in FPS games when you're crossing an open field. A shot could come in from any direction. You wouldn't want to walk through an open field and risk getting detected by a sniper hiding God knows where. This is the open prison. You aren't trapped by any walls, but what you are is a slow, fragile land mammal floating in an environment where everything else is a perfect predator. In this context, your awareness of your agency, your ability to swim anywhere, is actually a curse. Because if you can go anywhere, so can they. This is the opposite of what happened with Kevin and isolation providing him authority over his domain. Your isolation places you at direct risk. So let's update our calculation. We fear the darkness in the small room because it suffocates us, but we fear the infinite void because it swallows us. Isolation doesn't just bring about the awareness of being alone physically, it brings about the realization of scale. When you are alone in the universe of the deep sea, you are nothing but a speck of dust. And that brings us to the final, true definition of horror. It isn't just helplessness in the limits of how we defined it earlier as the inability to act. True horror is insignificance. It's the realization that if you scream in the empty room, something might hear you, and you're too small to stop any consequences.